Why in particular did you want to tell it as a young adult story?
I think I'm just really drawn to young adult fiction because I think it gives you a bit more of it's almost a freshness of perspective. In some ways, I think the teenage years are they're so tumultuous. I mean, everyone says these things as tumultuous. You're going through change, you're looking for where you fit in the world and all those sorts of things. But that's what makes them that's what draws me to them, because there's so much that you can say in that you aren't necessarily going to do in an adult novel. In an adult novel, I suppose you're expected to look at it from a different perspective, and that process of discovery, and maybe it was a way, subconsciously, I don't know, maybe it was a way for me to work through that thing that had happened to me when I was 20 years old. Why was that, event, not only that event, but the people who were involved in that event, things that's happened subsequently, not necessarily involved in the car accident, but just that whole period of my life. Maybe that's what I needed to work through. And I think as an adult novel, I'm not that interested in older characters, which is pretty bad considering my age. But I'm just not. And I don't know why. That's just me, I suppose. No, in a way, I don't know. Maybe it's just me. It's just the way I am. Like my dad died a few years ago at 97 3/4, as he was always very keen to tell people. He was 97. Once he got over the age of 90, he would tell you each quarter and each half, like, little kids do when you're 40. Yeah. I'm far enough. He'd say, I'm 96 3/4. But he always had that real childlike wonder about him, and maybe, I don't know whether I have just inherited that or I saw that in him, and that's something that really attracts me as well. So I'm just more interested in exploring things from a younger perspective rather than someone my age. I don't know. That probably says maybe I should act my age, but I'm not very good at it.
All right. Well, because you keep bringing up your age, I'm going to ask, how old are you?
58.
58. I was like, this is a rude question. I'm like, well, she keeps saying it. So, I mean, you're literally 58. Spirit is a separate question.
Spiritually, I think I'm 16.
And 3/4 maybe.
Yeah. And 3/4.
Yeah, very important. Well, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you've had other books published under a different name. Is that right? Or
no, so I haven't. I've had short stories published under my own name, and I've also published short stories under the name Rukani, which is more horror stuff. So that tends to be a bit more adult because it's pretty dark. Some of the stuff it covers is pretty dark. I did self-publish a novel back in 2015 under the name Maree Kimberley, which is just Maree, but just with Ree. But yeah, no, I write Rukani. I haven't done that for a while, but I was writing horror under short stories under the name Rukani for quite a while. And so I suppose the reason that I chose to write those stories under a different name was because, yeah, as I said, some of them were really dark. And they covered, there was a lot of violence and sometimes gore and really dark things in them.
Sure.
And also it helped me be a different person. So when I was Rukani, I was somebody else.
Yeah, and I imagine that's liberating. So, well, for all intents and purposes, this is your 58 and this is your kind of debut traditionally published novel. And I don't want to make out like that's some crazy prospect because that's really patronizing. But I also think it's a really cool thing because, you see it a lot in kind of chit chat among aspiring writers who want to get traditionally published. Like, I've got to get this done before I turn 30. I've got to get this done before X, before I have a child, before I don't know, become a fully fledged accountant. I don't know, whatever it is. there's that idea that like you get your creative, maybe I'm just projecting, but you know, I think it's valid to talk about. You get your kind of creative dream out of the way, and then you get back to whatever, adult life, or if you, more relevantly, I guess, if you don't tick it off by X, it's not going to happen. So I'd really like you to, if possible, just talk about what it feels like to be a debut author in the traditional sense at 58, and why maybe we should all just loosen up about what age means when it comes to creating art.
Well, look, I remember, this is going back several years ago, probably around 10 or 15 years ago, there was this little small publisher in Brisbane that for a while was publishing kids' books. And I remember they had a debut author who was 73, 75, in her early 70s. And I just think, and I mean, it's true that, you know, when the older you get, I think that the more accepting you become of things will just happen when they happen. And yes, it would have been great in a way if I'd been able to get something published earlier, but maybe it just wasn't the right time for me. Maybe this is the right time for me. And I think, you know, the whole thing about age and, you know, like, because you see I see stories about some young people and what they've achieved, you know, by the age of like 25, and I think, it is just unbelievable. That is incredible. By the age of 25, well, I'd had my first baby, but that was about, maybe that's an achievement, I don't know. But it's, your life trajectory is what it is. And everything that you learn as you go through life, as long as you are continuing to learn, then it just evolves the way it evolves, you know. And I think if I'd said, okay, if I don't get my first book published by the age of 50, then I'm giving up. So, well, what would have been the point of that? As I said before, you know, I made a decision back in 2008 or 2009, maybe, that I was going to write no matter what. And whether or not that work got published or whether or not I was ever published, I would continue to write, because that was a part of me and that's who I am and that's what I want to do. And to not write would be the worst thing ever for me. So age is immaterial. Like, you know, if you can get published in your 20s, in your 30s, in your 40s, in your 50s, in your 60s, in your 70s, in your 80s, does it really matter? You know, there are people who start new careers, or, you know, not so much new careers, but like really start exploring new sides of themselves in their 70s and their 80s. Like, it's ridiculous to limit yourself just because of a number.
Totally.